Hey, what's up, everyone? Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to another great video meetup today, sponsored by Wasabi. Today, we're going to be talking all about how to think about your cloud migration, how your cloud strategy, especially in light of current times. So for more on this, we have a great panel of experts for y'all today, including an IT pro from the Spiceworks community, as well as a few experts from Wasabi. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start things off with a round of introductions. Coming to us first from the IT Pro community, you guys know him. He's been on the air and video meetup several times. Always excited to have him on. Please welcome back Mr. Brandon Bigford. Brandon, welcome back. How's it going today, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Brandon, for those who've not met you before, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. Yeah, I work for a local managed service provider. I'm the head of our account management office, or our project management office, spun off from our account management office. So I'm in charge of all new implementations, existing infrastructure upgrades, stuff like that for on-premise and, cloud native, hybrid solutions, things of that nature. And I've been with this company for several years now, and it's been pretty interesting serving a lot of the customers, local and remote.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Brandon. Coming up next, we've got a couple of Davids from Wasabi. Let's introduce first Mr. David Boland. David, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Thanks, doing well, Justin. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. David Boland, do you mind telling us a little about yourself and what you do for Wasabi?
Sure. I'm on our product marketing team here at Wasabi, and we're responsible for evangelizing the Wasabi products and features to our channel partners, to our technology partners, and to our customers to make sure they have a good understanding of the features and advantages and benefits of Wasabi to them and versus our competition.
All right, great. Well, thank you for joining us, David. Last but not least, I'd like to welcome back the CEO of Wasabi. You guys might recognize him from his appearance on the air, where we forced him to actually eat wasabi as part of a bit that we did. He was such a fantastic and wonderful sport. We're excited to have him back. Mr. Dave Friend. Dave, how's it going today?
Good. It's great to be back, and thanks a lot for hosting us.
Of course. I'm glad that you weren't scared off by our antics, and you ate the wasabi pretty well. Do you guys eat a lot of wasabi in the Wasabi office? Is that something you had a lot of experience with?
Well, we get a lot. I think, there are a lot of people who think they're being pretty clever, sending us a package of wasabi of one sort or another. So we have quite a wasabi collection at this point.
Wonderful. Well, Dave, do you want to give us a quick intro to not only yourself and what you guys do, but also for those who aren't super familiar with Wasabi, kind of how you guys came to be?
Sure. So the two founders of Wasabi are me and my partner, Jeff Flowers. And Jeff and I started Carbonite, which is the backup company that was in the public market and sold last year for $1.4 billion. And we got to be cloud storage experts. And Jeff came to me 4 or 5 years ago now and said that he and our chief architect had some ideas for a new storage architecture that, if they could make it work, would be cheaper and faster than anything on the planet. So I encouraged them to go off and do it. And a year later, they had it working. And so I left Carbonite and came over to help start Wasabi. And so I'm the CEO, and Jeff and I are co-founders. And we've gone from zero to, well, now we've got over 15,000 customers, 2,600 channel partners, data centers in the US, Europe, and Asia. We're growing revenues, something like 40% quarter over quarter. We grew 5x last year. This year we'll probably grow 3.5x or something like that. So business is booming. We designed Wasabi to be pretty much identical to Amazon S3 because that's de facto industry standard. So the API is identical. The management console is very similar. So any place you're using Amazon S3, you can unplug it and plug in Wasabi. The main difference is Wasabi is 1/5 the price of Amazon S3. We're $5.90 per terabyte per month versus $21 to $23 for S3, and we're faster, and we have the same 11 nines of durability. Awesome. So it's we view storage as kind of a commodity, and we are very good at it. We're like somebody that's figured out how to make sheet steel for 10% less.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us as well, Dave. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Before we go any further, though, a couple of things that I did want to cover. If you do have questions for our panel today, please make sure to get those into our Q&A widget down below. We'll be taking those questions later on in the show. Also, please make sure to check out Wasabi's provided some great resources for us today in that resource list. And also, I wanted to give a special shout out to chat. See a lot of our favorite folks, including George, Virtual Hug Soul. What's going on, man? Also, shout out to Ben Sutliff and Nick Kopka in edits. A lot of our favorite folks. Of course, if you do participate in chat, we do ask that you adhere to our community guidelines and making sure that everyone's having a positive and professional time in today's events. And as a special thank you for hanging out with us today, one of you guys is going to be walking away with a Sony wireless headphones with built-in mic. Perfect for the, 8 to 10 hours of video conferencing that if you're anything like me that you have to go through. So make sure to stick around until the end of the show. We'll be announcing the winner of that prize as well as taking your questions. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started into it. Brandon, I wanted to start off with you. I think cloud has been one of these things that for quite some time people are like, okay, I kind of get it. You pay kind of upfront and as you go. I'm sorry, you pay as you go instead of upfront. It's hosted in someone else's computer, and I think it kind of ended up being an as needed, or like you really evaluated your cloud strategy as it was needed, depending on changing business needs. Of course, as we've all seen, everyone's kind of business ended up getting upheaved in the past few months. Earlier this year, based on your customers and that you're talking to, are you seeing a more people changing the way that they're evaluating the clouds, kind of in light of what's going on in the world right now?
Oh, 100%. There for a while, for the last several years, we've had two really distinct customer sets where you've got one customer set that, they're 100% on-prem, not due to any type of regulatory compliance, although that's kind of gone out the window with, a lot of cloud providers now, being able to maintain, a lot of levels of compliance. So not really anything of that nature. It was really just they were doing it because they wanted to, less of a need to. Even budgetary, reasons, it would make sense for them to move over to cloud services. And then, so you got on the one side, you've got a really rigid on-prem customer set. And then on the other side, you have customers that say, it feels really inflexible for me to be on-prem for anything, including our, on-prem PBXs and, on-prem, compute workloads. And so they're just 100% cloud native for everything. And, you do have some that are in the middle where they're hybrid. They got some stuff in the cloud that's critical workloads that need, 11 nines of uptime. And then you got some things that are on-prem that make sense financially to have it there. So when we went into COVID, though, the customer set that, is all on-prem, they, we've been scrambling to help, hundreds of different customers to try and be more cloud native because, it's been such a limitation for them to continue operating as they have been with all their remote staff. It was fine for people to VPN in, access what they need to, but they were not in a position to do that overnight, no matter how many conversations we had with them. And then you've got on the other side that cloud native customer where they say, oh, okay, we need to go remote overnight with 500 staff. What do we do? It's like, oh, you're good. You can just go home.
Yeah, David Boland, what about you guys? What have you seen? Are you guys seeing shifts in the way that your customers are exploring what cloud is going to mean to them at this point, and in what ways?
Yeah. So Justin, I want to echo what Brandon said. The first use cases we saw in cloud object storage really were around backup and archive. Makes sense to keep a extra set of data off of prem somewhere. Your 3-2-1 rule of thumb, right? Keep 3 copies of data, 2 on different media and 1 offsite. And the cloud is a perfect place for that offsite to be kept. When COVID hit, we saw a lot of inbound messages, emails, and even phone calls from people saying, hey, I can't get into my data center. I'm out of tape or my rope or my library's full, my LTO's done. What do I do now? how do I attach my backup to the cloud? Also saw a lot of folks who can't get their service provider on-prem into their data center because of COVID lockdown reasons. So they may have had a NetApp or an EMC device ready to rack and stack sitting on a loading dock someplace, but they couldn't get somebody into the building to use it. So we see a shift right now in use cases. We see a lot more people using the cloud for active archive, maybe in the media entertainment space in Hollywood. A lot of folks using Cloud Object as a place to put some of the media and give people access to it from multi-geographic locations. I think COVID is actually increasing the amount of use cases we're seeing at a faster rate than we would have usually.
Mm-hmm. Dave Friend, are you anything from your perspective? Like, what are you seeing as kind of the biggest changes in the ways that customers are needing the cloud at this point? I mean, is the fact that everybody's now at home change the way that we need to access that data? And does that make cloud a better fit in some cases?
Yeah, it definitely does. And as Dave is saying, I had a call just last week from somebody who ran out of VPN licenses. They literally couldn't connect everybody up at the same time. They didn't have enough bandwidth provisioned in their own data center to allow the entire company to be hooking up to their on-prem storage, and it just nobody was really ready for this. But that's certainly driving business. And we've been having record week after record week since the coronavirus hit, and I think largely that's a function of people saying, you know what, this idea of having our own on-prem storage isn't so great, because it takes human beings to keep it going and to service it, and we can't, as Dave said, we can't even get into our own data centers in some cases. So things aren't staying up; they're failing. And they can't get it fixed, and there's just not enough redundancy and not enough expandability. You can't add more equipment, so it's just accelerating a trend that was there already. And in addition to that, one of the things I'm hearing is that the project, say, of migrating some of your data to Wasabi's cloud is first and foremost a cost-saving exercise. And a lot of people have had this project sitting on their pile of to-do, for 6 months or more. And now with everybody sort of hunkered down at home and under orders to try to figure out how to cut costs in the company, all of a sudden a whole bunch of these projects that were sort of lingering, not getting done, have moved to the top of the pile. And some of the sort of the shiny new stuff that people were working on, projects that were a little more strategic, have been pushed down in the pile. And so I think we benefit from that.
Mm-hmm. Brandon, let's go back to you. So David had mentioned an interesting use case around, I need to back up my data center, or I need to increase infrastructure, but I'm not physically allowed to go in there. Is that something you guys have encountered? Is data accessibility, either from the IT perspective or from the user perspective, something that's coming up more for you guys?
Yeah, so from the data center perspective, we've got several customers in data centers around the Treasure Valley here. We've got some down in the Switch data center down in Nevada that we've had to work with. And depending on the data center, they don't allow anybody in there. So, there might be, a couple of smart hands you might be working with, but their change requests and everything are so increased right now with COVID that they're overworked. So things are just, even if you can get somebody in there, it's so delayed to try and get that stuff changed. And then for customer sites, if there's a server or something that goes down and it's still on-prem, we have to coordinate to, get the building unlocked and not make any physical contact with anybody. A lot of the areas that we're working in, I have, our employees, they have to wear full PPE. And, then when they actually go in there, it can't be, really a room that anybody's used for a couple hours if it's a place that, had a lot of foot traffic in the last couple of days. So just trying to take a lot of precautions to make sure that, logistically things are lining up. But it's really, really difficult from a customer perspective and from a data center perspective, just day to day.
Mm-hmm. David Boland, going back to what you were saying earlier, as far as the use case changing that more active data is being used versus as a backup. Is that, in your opinion, due to just kind of customers becoming more comfortable and more confident in data stored in the cloud, or is it an actual like improvement in, say, performance for the cloud that the data is stored in there?
So there's two parts to that two answers to that question, Justin. So the performance in cloud object storage has increased dramatically in the last 5 years. It used to be, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, object storage was just deep and cold, and that was where you went, where data went to die. Right? If you didn't want to store it on-prem because it was too expensive to store it on-prem, you put it up in archive and you let it sit there until the time was up, and then you let it atrophy. Right? As Dave said earlier, things have changed in the last 5-10 years. The file systems are much more performant. 100 gigabit Ethernet links between servers, that hold the storage. Database reading the information out of database is much faster. So you could put data up into an object storage now and get a much faster millisecond response time. You couldn't do it in the past. So I think that has been there. People have been hesitant to move to that architecture because of their experiences in the previous in the decade before. But the way things are going now, cost overruns, and with COVID, it's forcing people to take a chance, and do it. And once they have tried, active archiving, and they see how fast the response time is and how much less expensive it is than a standard S3, they're all on board. It's accelerating the timeline.
Dave, friend, what do you feel like it's like cloud adoption is increasing more because of capabilities within the technology, or is it just customer becoming more comfortable and confident and educated about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are starting to recognize that owning your own infrastructure doesn't necessarily add anything to your business. If your business is banking or manufacturing chemicals or genomic sequencing or scientific research, you're running a telescope in Chile or a particle collider at some university, storage there's no more reason you would want to have your own hardware infrastructure than you would, say, want to own your own electric power generating plant. It's just like, it doesn't add anything to your mission in the world. And so I think, people are starting to recognize how much it costs, not just the equipment, but all the people to maintain it and keep it running and so forth. And, when I walk into one of the data centers where we have equipment, you walk down the aisles and you look in everybody's cages, and every single person has come up with a different storage solution. One guy's got NetApp, somebody else has got EMC, somebody else has got, HP, and you look at it and you say, why go to all of that trouble when storage is storage, and it either stores the data or it doesn't store the data. And so I think that's what's happening, is people are starting to recognize that the glass wall with the blinking lights behind it is a good show, but it's not a strategic part of your business. That's the kind of stuff you should just leave to somebody else who knows how to do it better.
Mm-hmm. Brandon, you guys have been working with Wasabi for a while now. What have you guys seen as the best use cases or actual success stories based out of the work that you've done with it?
Yeah, so we've primarily been using Wasabi for offsite cloud backups because, in a bucket you can have, limitless scalability, and I've broken it down time and again. Before Wasabi, AWS, we could get, a terabyte for about $24, but then you're getting hit with all these microtransactions if you have to restore from it. So, it wasn't perfect. And if I've got like a 4 terabyte Synology NAS that, 4 terabytes usable, maybe I'm dropping, maybe about $1,000 between, disks and the, diskless chassis and some memory. And, when I amortize that, I can come out to about, for $6 a terabyte with Wasabi and no egress charges, I amortize that out to about 41, 42 months. So, we're talking pushing 4 years on a device before I even break even. And that's just, if I'm on a 5-year hardware life cycle, that extra year, assuming that growth is even predictable, that it's just, in a lot of cases, it just wasn't feasible. So when Wasabi came and then we saw that there was no egress charges, really my only question came down to, well, how fast can I restore from that? Because I can restore pretty fast on my LAN. But, with some of the acceleration technology that's available at Wasabi, it really just comes down to what's our WAN bandwidth at the customer location, and can they afford to do restores during the day. In most cases, that is true because customers have been taking their WAN bandwidth a lot more seriously since the CenturyLink outage back in many months ago, where it affected the entire U.S. And with customers now having more of a cloud native approach because of COVID hitting, and a lot of those customers that previously said, I think things are running okay now, and then you get really uprooted with either a mass ISP outage or COVID disrupting and making people remote. Our use cases are definitely increasing. Most of it's been backups, but we are having some conversations with customers switching over their production environment as well.
Mm-hmm. And then to that end, I mean, so you've worked with a lot of different cloud providers.
I think I lost your mic, Justin.
Yeah,
Justin,
we lost your audio there.
How's that now? Can you guys hear me?
you're good.
Yeah,
And,
good.
All right, that's weird.
To that end, and then you went silent.
Oh, okay. Brandon, so yeah, I mean, you've worked with lots of different cloud providers, including AWS. Are there notable differences one way or the other between when you've used Wasabi and other vendors, in addition to just the cost structure?
Oh, definitely. So what I really like about Wasabi is that they've taken an approach to do one thing and do that one thing really, really well. And it can be something that can be used for a variety of use cases. So where Wasabi hasn't dove into cloud, like cloud compute and security as a service for IDS and IPS services and things of that nature. Focusing on doing one thing extremely well provides a lot of value for that one thing. And I mean, if Wasabi ever grows into a whole bunch of other solutions, great. But we really haven't compared like Wasabi to all of AWS, because AWS has I think they have 450 different types of services that they offer now. And so you're going to get tons and tons of legacy services and hardware that seem to almost wash over into some of the other SKUs that they offer. And I don't know if that has any effect, on the pricing, but just having one set predictable pricing model, no egress charges, so I can kind of piece together what our solution stack is supposed to be. So I might take, Wasabi's storage, and I might take, AWS compute, and I might take, a security as a service from another vendor, like New Cloud or somebody like that. So it's really, it's not one solution or the other. It's put all the best parts together that are going to make the most sense financially and operationally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Someone gonna say something? Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think Brandon sees the future of the cloud, and I think these sort of walled gardens like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft have, where they, you can put your data in, but they have to pay to get it back out. I don't think that solution is going to hold. And I'm old enough to remember when you walked into a data center and every piece of gear in the data center had an IBM logo on it. And, pretty soon EMC came along and ate their lunch on disk drives, and somebody else came along and ate their lunch on printers, and then memory boards. And now you walk into a data center and you'll see 20 or 30 different manufacturers' equipment all working together in harmony based on standards. And I think that's the way the cloud will go as well. You'll find people like Wasabi that just say, we only want to do storage, but we're going to do it better than anybody else. And then you're going to find other people who do compute, and somebody else is going to do content delivery, and somebody else is going to do analytics and AI and all these other things. And then you're going to have MSPs like Brandon, who are going to be smart enough to pick and choose the best solutions by piecing together components from different manufacturers. I think that's the way the cloud's going to evolve. It's not going to be these big monolithic, everything from one vendor kind of environments.
Dave Boland, I was going to ask. I mean, I know Dave Friend has talked about how. I mean, Wasabi was basically designed to be mimic AWS in as many ways as possible, just so user adoption and integration can be as seamless as possible. But are there other kind of notable differences between AWS, if that's what you're familiar with, to Wasabi that we should be aware of?
All right, let's go up this. So Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage is almost identical to Amazon AWS S3. Like Dave said, almost identical, right down to the APIs, except for we're 1/5 the cost and a lot faster than Amazon. But what really separates us, and Brandon touched upon it, is the microcharges. Wasabi storage the cost is totally predictable. You only pay for what you store for a period of time. And if you know your capacity of storage and you know how long you're going to store it, you know exactly what your costs are going to be. In AWS, Google, Azure, IBM, you have egress charges that range from 2 cents to 9 cents per gigabyte, depending on if you have direct connect or if it's over the internet. You have API charges, all microcharges for your puts and your gets and your lists. So if you want to put something up there, it's going to cost you. If you want to get something back, it's going to cost you. If you want to list what you have up there and run a check against what you think you have, it's going to cost you. You have a small object tax in a lot of cases. That if your object is too small, they'll add a buffer onto it and bump it up so it meets their minimum requirement. There are request charges that are not the same as get charges. Just to ask to get your data back is a charge. And there are overhead charges on the archive side. So if you want to put something into the deep archive, well, they're going to charge you to add an 8K header to each object. It's going to sit in S3 so that when you want to find it, you go to S3 to ask for it. Oh, by the way, if you put it in archive, you're going to add another 34K to that object, so the metadata sits with it too. So there are so many microcharges and so many different charges coming your way. It's not predictable. You can't predict what it's going to be. The difference is, going back to your original question, Justin, if you know what your storage capacity is, and you know how long you're going to keep it, and how much you don't even know how much you want to get back from it, you're going to know what your cost is with Wasabi. With the other folks, it's a mystery. Every month it's a mystery. You get your mystery usage bill, and hopefully you didn't go over, and hopefully you don't get yelled at by the CFO.
So Brandon, I wanted to ask you next, the work that you've done with Wasabi, has it been predominantly more on-premises to Wasabi, or are you doing other cloud to Wasabi migrations?
So predominantly it's been on-prem, just because of, most of our customer base has been on-prem. I have been looking into, having, some of like our Azure workloads and AWS workloads, instead of, protecting those in the ways that we have been, which financially it's been, working really well up to this point. But, possibly putting like a Veeam server, out in Azure, AWS, and then having that shot over to Wasabi, because with Veeam version 10, now there's a lot more support for, they said that there was S3 compatible, offloading of backups and backup copies, but what they were really saying was it's AWS compatible. So, because you had to have an AWS login, and so it wasn't S3, it was AWS, but now there's a lot more support for some of those backup technologies to be able to just shoot it straight to Wasabi rather than having to go, Veeam to a Synology and then a Synology up using like a cloud sync to Wasabi. And I wanted to touch on something that I saw flying through the chat really quick, that is really important for security perspective. Somebody had asked, it's super easy to back up your data, but how's the data actually protected from malware, such as ransomware. There's a compliance. Wasabi calls it compliance in their dashboard that when you configure compliance, it basically gives you immutable backups or immutable data for a certain period of time. So like for all of our customers, we go into compliance, set it for 30 days so that if ransomware tries to, change that data over and over and over to, to get it to be encrypted, all of our, customer data is immutable up to that defined period.
Dave Boland, anything to add to that? I mean, I think, certainly protecting your backups in the cloud is a question that a lot of folks have. And anything you would like to elaborate or any other kind of security and encryption protection features that folks ought to know about when the data is actually stored in the Wasabi cloud?
Yeah. So Brandon nailed it on the head, right? So there's a feature called immutable buckets, bucket immutability that Wasabi has that allows you to set this compliance feature on the bucket so that anything that goes into that bucket can never be encrypted or held ransom for the period of time in which you want it to be held unencryptable. So it could be 30 days, 60, 90, it could be 1 year, 5 years, 7 years, whatever it is. Wasabi can't go in there and encrypt it, and you can't go in and encrypt it, and bad characters can't go in there and get it. So bucket immutability protects from ransomware. It's the easiest and best way to do it. We have a new feature coming out. It's going to be object lock, which is object immutability. So instead of setting it on a specific bucket, you can set it on a per object basis. That's coming in the second half of this year. That'll be another great immutability feature. But as you mentioned earlier, as Brendan mentioned earlier, we have 11 nines of data durability. 11 nines. That's incredible, right? And then between data durability and data availability SLAs, there's really not a lot of security issues you're going to have up in Wasabi Cloud. I have to imagine that your data is probably safer in the cloud than it is on-prem these days.
Dave, Friend, anything that you'd add? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, 11 nines of durability, if you put that in sort of more understandable terms, if you gave me 1 million objects to store, statistically, I would lose one object every 659,000 years. So it's pretty solid. And you don't hear about any of the major cloud vendors who have 11 nines of durability. It's also S3 is 11 nines. You don't hear about them actually losing data. And, for some reason, people are still comfortable with putting a tape in a box and handing it off to, an Iron Mountain driver or something like that. And if you read on their website, they only claim something like 5 nines of reliability in terms of actually being able to find and return your tape. And you read stories about, the driver goes into Dunkin' Donuts, and while he's ordering his sprinkles, somebody jumps in the truck and drives off with a whole truckload of tapes. And, this has happened a number of times. And I think it's just a matter of time before people realize that the cloud, with everything encrypted and everything protected with things like immutable buckets, is far more reliable than anything you're likely to achieve in your own data center. I'll add one more thing to the immutable bucket discussion, because as a backup guy, I can tell you that about 80% of all the times people lose their data, it's not because of some malware or something like that. It's because somebody pushes the wrong button and accidentally blows up their own files. And or they, even something simple like in Word, it's so easy to overwrite a file, and then you've lost the previous versions. And if you have your data stored in immutable buckets, that can't happen. The other thing that's good about it is I know we have a lot of customers in the surveillance business, and when you go into court these days and produce a surveillance video, you have to be able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that that video has not been altered or doctored. And storing them in an immutable bucket with chain of custody and so forth, it gives you evidence quality data storage. So these are all new concepts to a lot of people, because the idea of immutable buckets is really not something which people deal with on a local storage basis.
Brandon, as far as the migration process itself, was there anything noteworthy or that we should know about, kind of based on your experience, especially having, done lots of different types of migrations?
Yeah, so from two different approaches, having your offsite data backups, loaded up to a cloud storage vendor versus whatever the customer is currently doing, they're still having to really focus in on what their WAN connectivity is, unless it's a customer from a regulatory compliance like we deal with, various state entities, such as, the lottery. And because of regulatory compliance, they can't store their stuff in certain locations. So they have to, essentially take, external drives off-site in a secure fashion, store it in a vault. But for most customers, they can, even with regulatory compliance, can go up to a cloud storage vendor. So, for backups, we're having to look at, scheduled windows, what their WAN connectivity is like, and, having to take in considerations about the ability to restore and what the acceleration of that might look like, or what their SLA is. So really just kind of paying attention to, if you're not physically taking it off site, is it really going to be any different than what you're doing now? Because, with Veeam version 10, being able to shoot it straight to Wasabi with some of those, better compression and acceleration technologies in Veeam, I can get that stuff up there faster versus having to go to a Synology NAS and having that cloud sync it up, which it works okay for most customers, but there's some where they're in a rural environment, and that rural connection is just, it's kind of slow. And so taking advantage of some modern tech outside of what their bandwidth is to be able to compress that and shoot it up. From a production perspective, we've had several customer conversations where they're wanting to use certain cloud storage solutions beyond what their on-prem application or what their cloud application is really designed to do. So if they have, let's say, a cloud application, we've determined this is not going to perform well in an object storage fashion, then don't use object storage. But and that's nothing, that it's Wasabi versus S3 versus anything else. It's more of a conversation about what type of, storage architecture we're supposed to look at outside of what vendors we're looking at within that storage space. So it's a lot of the considerations that need to be taken into account when doing a migration or a net new stand up. Oh, lost your mic, Justin.
Glad it's not us having the trouble.
Yeah, there we are.
I thought Austin was a tech center down there. There's a lot of high tech down there.
You would think so.
Has the worst audio and video connections.
My specific neighborhood, I think, has the most internet problems. So there's that. David Boland, I was just going to ask you, as far as migrations, do you guys provide any sort of guidance or recommendations?
From a migration perspective, you know what? It's customer specific, really. There are some fantastic products out there that I would say, are a good first step into the cloud. So if, let's say you have on-prem storage capacity that's getting full. You don't want to go out and buy another HPE or Hitachi Vantara or NetApp or EMC device to rack and stack and power up and go through the depreciation cycle, right? There's products out there from a company called Comprise or Igneous or Defendex or a bunch of them actually that will go out, identify the data in your on-prem environment that hasn't been touched in a long time. Maybe it's cold, maybe it's 90 days, 180 days, a year old, no one's touched it, and mark that as a candidate to move to the cloud and give you the option of moving that stuff directly to Wasabi and freeing up the capacity on-prem so you don't have to buy more hardware. You can just use that on-prem stuff for anything that's new and hot. So migrating to the cloud, depending on the use case, could be as simple as Comprise or Igneous or another platform that Wasabi works well with because they're part of our Technology Alliance program. If you haven't moved to the cloud yet, backup and archive are probably the easiest ways to go. There's not a lot of of knowledge required for those, to be honest with you. Veeam has a fantastic solution for people who want to move off-prem. If you're a 9.5.4 customer and you want to start moving to the cloud, you can do it with what they call their cloud tier. Veeam will move older data like a Comprise or Ignis off of the prem up to the cloud. Version 10, fantastic fit for Wasabi. O365, it's not on-prem, but O365 backup from Veeam is another fantastic solution. So really what we're talking about is migrating really would require the use case being something you're comfortable with. And it's going to be archive or a backup.
Mm-hmm. And Dave, or either Dave, anything that we should know, is there any difference if you're doing a cloud-to-cloud migration versus on-premise to cloud? Are there any differences or anything, new considerations that you need to take into place?
Yeah, I'll let Boland handle that one.
All right, I like this one because it just so happens that there's been an increase lately of inbound calls and messages from people who have originally started to store their data in an S3 tier or in Azure, and now they've gotten to the point where they say, well, I can't afford it anymore, or I don't want to move forward. How do I move my data from S3 to Wasabi, or how do I move it from Azure Blob to Wasabi? We see a lot of other parties popping up whose sole purpose in life is to move data between clouds. We have a partnership with a company called Assembly, ACEMBLY. They're out of California. And they move data out of S3 and into Wasabi for less than the egress costs if you're doing it yourself. The problem with once you've already got data up into an S3 or into a blob, and you want that data back, well, you have the egress charge. That's expensive, right? So you're going to have to cough that up because somebody made a mistake somewhere in the past, and they put too much data up there, and now they have to get it back, right? So Assembly helps reduce the cost, put it into Wasabi, and then help save money in the long run. It takes 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, sometimes a couple months, depending how much data and what tier you're coming off. But there's a return on investment where you start saving money right away. Also, in the cloud-to-cloud migration story, you're going to want to just be aware of the connection to the speed, right? So we have partnerships with folks like Megaport or Flexential, where you can run a 1 gig or 10 gig connection between Wasabi and AWS to move your data in and out. Cloud migration, I think you're going to see in the year 2021 will be a big story as more products come to light and come to market designed to move data between clouds. We're no longer going to be stuck in the it's no longer going to be trapped in. You're no longer going to be trapped in the cloud. I mean, it's going to be you're going to be able to move your data out. And if it's a Veeam backup, maybe you don't want to move it out. Maybe you just want to keep it there, let it atrophy, and do all your new new backups to Wasabi, and let the AWS atrophy out, so you don't incur the AWS egress costs. But yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of activity between clouds end of this year and into next year.
All right, great. Well, we have some questions from the audience, so we'll go ahead and get to them. First one comes from Michael 7140 Hertz. Is the pricing to storage based on uncompressed data or data after dedupe compression?
Dave?
Okay, so the pricing is so if it's after it's Wasabi capacity. So you can store your compressed data up in Wasabi. And so let's say you have, let's use a Veeam again as an example, 10 terabytes of Veeam on-prem. You compress it down to 5. You send it to Wasabi. That's 5 terabytes. So whatever comes to Wasabi is what you're going to be charged for. So the deduping compression takes place on-prem.
Yeah, and to curtail on that, from a customer perspective, I get the question sometimes, well, why is Wasabi not compressing my data to save me money? But there's a lot of data where if you compress that data, you run the risk of actually data degradation. So there's not a case where we would want a vendor to just automatically do all this stuff for us, because we need more control over that. So if we need to compress it to save money, we'll compress it first.
Yeah,
that's a good point. That's a good point.
Furthermore,
what happens if we compress it up in our cloud and you just need a portion of that data back, maybe it's a clip of a video or a part of an object, and we've compressed it, your transaction application that you use to put it up the cloud may not be able to find it and say it's gone. So it's not good that we don't do anything with it. Dave, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say everything in Wasabi is encrypted, and once it's encrypted, you really can't compress it anyway. So we leave it up to the customer. If the customer wants to compress their data before they send it to us, that's fine. If they don't, then we just encrypt it, put it on our storage. We don't want to have any unencrypted data in our data centers, period.
Great. Let's go to a question from George, who just wants to know how much internet bandwidth is needed for the solution to perform correctly. I'd like to start with Brandon. How do you guys typically scope out internet bandwidth requirements for someone that's looking to you for more cloud usage?
Man, I could talk for about an hour just on that question alone. Honestly, it's going to be kind of a vague answer. It really depends on what the application is, what its performance metrics are required, what the how many users are going to be connecting to that front end application that also then has to feed the back end application, what their WAN connectivity is for that particular site, if the person's remote and it's a cloud native application, or if it has to tunnel back through their data center. I mean, there's so many different variables that go into a decision about scoping out the the WAN bandwidth between all those connection points. And because we've dealt with some cloud native applications where we scoped everything out. It's performing really, really well for about 95% of the company, but then somebody goes off to Sam in Idaho, and they've got a 1 meg DSL connection, and it's not a great experience for them because they're out in the middle of the mountains. So we have recommendations for after we've scoped something that here's kind of your minimum for all your remote workers, but I mean, there are a ton of variables that go into the calculation. And to be honest, we have to work with some of the vendors sometimes because there's so many different advances in technology day over day. And as an MSP, we're dealing with, hundreds and thousands of customers and, dozens and dozens of different vendors that trying to, remember what the performance metrics are for one piece of vendor technology for all of these different things. It's really hard to keep track of. But just in short, that's such a complex question because of all the variables that go into it for every single customer environment, every single application build out.
Yep.
All right. Dave, Boland, anything that you guys would add as far as how you guys help customers or recommend for customers for their networking requirements?
Sure. Just to pick up where Brendan left off, getting your data to the cloud, depending on how much you have, can take a while, right? If you're going over the internet connection, if you say you have 50 terabytes, 100 terabytes, we have an appliance called the Wasabi Ball, which we ship to customers. It's a 100 terabyte appliance. They can load up their 100 terabytes on that appliance, send it back to us, and then we will ingress it for them at our site. So if you have a lot of data that you want to store, you don't want to choke up your internet connection, or you don't want to pay for a 1 gig pipe or a 10 gig pipe. Wasabi balls are the way to go to ingress your data to feed the cloud. Totally fine. Other than that, a lot depends on the speed of your connection. And it's going to vary depending on your application, who you are.
All right. Well, guys, we are, let's see if we have any other questions. I think that's all the questions that we've got for today. So I wanted to give you guys some opportunity to share any final takeaways for our audience today. Brandon, we'll start with you. Anything for folks that are either considering a move to the cloud and possibly what Wasabi could potentially play into that? Do you have any advice or recommendations for them?
Yeah, David had touched touched on a pretty important point there with the Wasabi ball, because a lot of these vendors have their own solution. Backblaze has their Fireball. Amazon has their Snowball. But that Wasabi ball, we've been looking into that for some customers who are pushing up against, maybe like a 300 meg connection, but they've got 35 terabytes of data that we're potentially looking at offloading. So we've started to look into that, and it's a really awesome offering for customers that need to just one time put a ton of data up there. Beyond that, for production use cases, we've talked about how it's going to wildly vary depending on what the application requirements are. But customers looking to move to the cloud, maybe for like archival purposes, we talked about immutable backups, and Dave brought up a really good point about when it came to like accidental deletes, where ransomware aside, where you can have compliance configured for an immutable bucket, from ransomware not being able to destroy your backups. But those accidental deletes, I actually find that really awesome. There's been several times where I'm trying to go in and clean out a bucket from a lot of stuff, and it's saying, nope, you can't delete any of this because it's, compliance is currently configured. And even though I'm intentionally deleting something, it's nice that I can't delete it because I have to go through all these steps to actually, get it deleted. So, a lot of customers that are, looking to move to the cloud, we're a storage solution and, IT solution company. Feel free to reach out. I'm on Spiceworks as B Bigford. Provide a lot of advice in the direct message channels to folks looking to, really anything that they need to do. So if somebody's looking at, backups to the cloud, archival purposes, we do this all day long. I'd be happy to help out for anybody looking at Wasabi.
Awesome. We appreciate it, Brandon. Dave Boland, we'll go to you next. Any final words of wisdom, any final takeaways for the audience today?
Yeah, you know what? I left something out earlier when you asked, are people starting to move to the cloud now? What are new use cases that are maybe different from the past, or why would somebody looking at going to the cloud? And there's been a whole host of organizations out there that have not been able to move to the cloud because they're not allowed to charge on a monthly basis their credit card. Right. So if you have a K through 12 educational program, or you're a nonprofit organization, or you're a government agency, or you have a specific order of operations in which you can purchase stuff, and on a monthly basis on a credit card that's going to have a mystery charge on it is not an option for you, you haven't been able to move to the cloud. This year, Wasabi introduced the concept of reserved capacity storage, RCS, in which we allow our customers to purchase upfront a specific capacity for a specific amount of time, and pay an invoice on a purchase order invoice. So it's not charged monthly to a credit card. You don't even need to put the credit card down because there are no API or micro charges. We don't need the credit card, right? And because we don't charge for egress, we don't need the credit card. So if an organization needs to have cloud storage or wants to have cloud storage, but can't do it on a credit card on a monthly basis, reserved capacity storage was designed for them. And you can talk to our partners about RCS and see if it's a good fit for you.
All right. And Dave Friend, any final takeaways from you?
I just want to emphasize Wasabi's commitment to the channel. When Amazon and some of the others came into the market, it seemed like their whole business strategy was to disintermediate the channel, in much the same way that they've done with retail sales. And, there were a lot of articles in the press about, how the channel's going to disappear. This is the end of the channel, blah, 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 because everybody's going to go direct. We've taken the opposite tack, which is that if my vision of how the cloud is going to evolve, which is a multi-vendor cloud, then you need people like Brandon and his company to deal with the complexities of how do you make Wasabi storage work with, say, Packets Compute or StackPath's Compute, and how do you take the best of breed in each category and make them all function together. And so we're very committed to the channel. We like to see everybody go through a channel partner because they get a lot of experience with the products. They understand how to make them work, and they're there to support the customer in a way that no one company can do on a national level.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank y'all so much again for hanging out today. To David and Brandon, as well as to Wasabi for sponsoring today's event. It's now time to announce the winner of our prize. The winner of the Sony wireless headphone with built-in mic is going to go to Shiva RR. Shiva RR, congratulations, you are the winner. Please send a private message to David S., the third David, in the community and let him know where you would like that shipped. And please enjoy it on us. And again, big thank you to all of our panelists today. We hope to hang out with you guys again real soon. For more information on other things that we've got coming up, make sure to stick around until after the presentation. You'll be able to see everything else that we've got coming up, and we hope to see you guys around. But until next time, guys, stay safe, keep it spicy, and we'll see y'all back here next time. So long, everybody.
Bye.
Question.